So that's a wee bit about me. So what I thought we'd do today is just touch on the historical context, talk a bit about the medical model of disability and the social model. Obviously the ethos of inclusive design, where it all kind of started and where I think we are today. Some of the barriers and challenges, and that could be barriers to design teams, it could be barriers to individuals. Challenges, lots of challenges out there for everyone. And hopefully provide some examples on how designers can design inclusively. And I think we've heard from all the speakers today, the end user is key, so to think about that end user and come up with a product or an environment that can suit as many people as possible. I'm not good with technology, so hopefully I'll be able to work with. Right. The medical model of disability is very much entrenched in what is wrong with that person. That person needs to be fixed, they need to be cured. And the model doesn't recognise the person or any of us for all our differing abilities. Every one of us in this room today, we all have different abilities. We have different things that we can offer. But the medical model is so negative. I mean, you look at some of the words on the screen, it's the international symbol of access and there's arrows going towards it, and the words round about the outside are confined to a wheelchair, can't climb stairs, needs help, can't use hands, can't talk. So it's just very negative, really, really negative. The social model of disability kind of started in about the 1970s, and so I'll just go to my notes for this one. It's the UK organisation, it was the Union of Physically Impaired Against Segregation, UPIS, and they stated that it's society that actually disables people. It's not the person's impairment or disability, it's actually us as members of society. So if we don't design accessible websites, if we don't design an accessible built environment, that's what disables people. When we look at the social model of disability, there was a chap, Mike Oliver, who's an academic, who happens to have a disability. And he coined the phrase the social model, and I think it was in the early 80s he came up with this phrase. And he was sent a census, a form to complete, and he really took exception to the questions because the census form wanted information about his disability, but the way the questions were structured, it was the medical model, it was what's wrong with you. So I've just chosen 3 questions. So the first one is, what complaint causes your difficulty in holding, gripping or turning things? So it's about the person, what's wrong with you that you can't do that? So Mike turned that around to, what defects in the design of everyday equipment like jars, bottles, tins causes you difficulty in holding, gripping or turning them? Now I don't know about anybody else, but me and a jar of beetroot, the jar of beetroot wins every time. The juice goes over me, it goes over the work surface. So you can see what he's done, he's turned the emphasis away from the individual. The next one is, are your difficulties in understanding people mainly due to a hearing difficulty? So again, it's what's wrong with you. So he changed that into, are your difficulties understanding people mainly due to their inability to communicate with you? And if we think about profoundly deaf people whose first language is often British Sign Language, BSL, around 70,000 individuals who use that language and don't consider themselves to have a disability. But we don't teach children in school, as far as I'm aware, British Sign Language. But interestingly, if you're an insomniac, if you turn on the TV in the wee small hours, a lot of the programmes will be signed, and yet we don't sign mainstream TV. I don't know the reasons for that one. And the final example, which relates to the built environment, does your health problem or disability prevent you from going out as often or as far as you would like? And you turn that one round to, what are the environmental constraints which make it difficult for you to get about in your immediate neighbourhood? And again, the emphasis back in designers of the built environment, if you get it wrong, then you disable people because they're not able to get about and get across town, get into a coffee shop, meet, socialise, interact, because as human beings that's what we want to do, we want to socialise, so we build in barriers. Quite often, if I'm speaking to people, there's an automatic assumption that various elements are covered under the building regulations. And I just want to tell you a bit of a kind of history, and a bit like Paul, I'm giving my age away here. Way back, the building regulations used to be split up into parts, Part A through to Part S. And in 1990, Part T was introduced, and it was designing for disabled people. But it was quite minimal. It was general access arrangements, sanitary facilities, spectator areas with fixed seating. So quite kind of basic elements to Part T. And while some people thought that was really good, were thinking about designing for accessibility, others quite rightly said, well, why is that a separate part? Why isn't designing for accessibility interspersed throughout the rest of the building regulations? So Part T was there for about 10 years, and then the elements were interspersed and more accessibility elements were added. But currently, the external public realm that we negotiate every day is still not fully covered by regulation, unless you have really robust supplementary planning guidance that planners can condition applications. We can still get schemes that disable people. On the screen there's an example of a photograph, and there's no curb, it's a shared space, and it's a grey palette. We seem to be designing grey these days, it must be the latest fashion colour. And we have stainless steel bollards with no contrasting band around the top. So for quite a few people, the lack of a curb, the command for a guide dog to get a safe crossing point for someone is find the curb. If there is no curb, there is no safe crossing point for a guide dog owner. And the fact that there are stainless steel bollards against a grey palette they'll be invisible for quite a lot of people. So again, the barriers are there. Accessible car parking bays are a standard size, and they have hatching at either side and at the back. The two of my friends drive their vehicles while seated in their wheelchairs. So they need space at the back of the vehicle for the tailgate to come up and the ramp to come down. So they don't have that safe area at the back of their vehicle, so you can actually feel quite vulnerable. And one of my friends just about got run down in the mad Christmas shopping panic a week before Christmas because a driver was desperate for a car parking bay and literally ran over the bottom of his ramp on his car. Now if he'd been on that ramp, that would just have been a disaster for him. So enlarged accessible car parking bays are not within the building standards. Over the years, the building regulations have improved, and we've done a lot to encourage designers to make buildings more accessible. And you know, principal entrance should be accessible toilets, etc. But for me, if there's an emergency, you need to evacuate. I think there still needs to be a lot of work done in that area. All designers have to do, I'll just go to my notes. In terms of the building regulations for means of escape, so they need to provide a temporary waiting space. It used to be called a refuge, but I think that conjured up a nice wee safe area, and it's not. I wouldn't like to be sat somewhere with potentially a fire going on and waiting to be evacuated, so it was changed to a temporary waiting space to get that message across that it is temporary until you're evacuated. So they need to provide a 700 by 1200mm space, and there is also a requirement to assist the escape process and reduce the anxiety of occupants making use of the space. An emergency voice communication system should be provided. So that's all that's required under the building regulations. And quite often, in addition to that, building managers or designers will install an evacuation style chair. And a lot of people assume, well, that's fine, you know, everybody can use the chair when we get out of the building. Not everyone can or will want to transfer into an evacuation style chair. So what happens in that scenario? Does that mean that we have a multi-storey building and certain people can't access it because we can't guarantee their safety and getting them back out? I've spoken to the Building Standards Division, and because our building regulations have moved away from being prescriptive, so we tell architects what to do, to performance-based, where they show us how they meet the functional standards, then the Building Standards Division can't be prescriptive and say you have to have a fire evacuation lift. I think the Grenfell fire, it will be interesting what will come out of that inquiry in a few years' time. Changing places toilets can change the lives of families if that facility is provided. It's a larger accessible toilet with a rise and fall bench, track and hoist system. Some families, if they want to take their families with them on a day out, go to a festival, go shopping, whatever, if there's no changing places toilet, it's not really, it's quite not traumatic, but maybe it is for some, but currently some families have to leave the accessible toilet door open because it's not large enough for there'll be two people helping to change somebody, and the person who needs change has to lie on the floor. So there's hygiene issues, there's dignity issues, all sorts of issues. But if there's a change in places toilet, then the whole family can go out and plan their day around about travelling to and from that facility. Again, it's mentioned within the building regulations, and it says there is no requirement to provide a CP toilet in terms of the building regulations. However, if a CP toilet is required, follow the guidance, and it lists the items that should be included in it. And I'll go on to talk about the dreaded word of value engineering in a few slides. Usually, if a CP toilet is installed in a design, we have to value engineer. That's one of the things that gets dropped. Visual links to the fire alarm. I should have actually looked at this room before I stood up. I don't think there are any visual links today. So a visual link, if the fire alarm goes off and someone is profoundly deaf and can't hear the alarm, also there might be one in that back wall actually, they simply look at the flashing beacon and then they know, oh, it's an evacuation, and I'll just be independent, the same as everybody else, and evacuate the building. Contrasting colour scheme, very, very few mentions of that within the regulations. Things like contrasting nosings to stairs, grab rails within accessible toilets, lobby areas, lifts and things. Nothing about the walls, the ceilings or whatever. And I was talking to a colleague a few weeks ago, and he provided a great analogy. In terms of the building regulations, if you have a building, if you turn it upside down and shake it, anything that's left is covered by the building regulations. So furniture, fittings, that type of thing, are not covered with the building regulations. It's only guidance that designers have to go with. So inclusive design. Sort of, in the UK, Selwyn Goldsmith was the person who kind of led the charge for inclusive design and accessibility. And his first book was published in 1963, Designing for the Disabled. And he was asked for a follow-up edition. So what he decided to do was actually go out. He chose the town of Norwich, perhaps the city, I'm not sure. And he chose to observe people, and he looked how they negotiated the area and what the barriers were, and looked at all that research data. He also interviewed 284 wheelchair users, and at that time there weren't any dropped curbs, and from that research in that book, that's where the dropped curb originated from, which we take for granted nowadays. So it was his role in observing people and observing the barriers that made that slight change. In America, they tend to talk about the term universal design. Again, sort of, this came about, the Vietnam vets were returning from war and returned to a world that was inaccessible for them, if many of them had amputations. So there was a whole lobby. The Americans with Disabilities Act came in 1990, and it was in 1997 that Ron Mace and a few others created the principles of universal design. And it kind of is common sense, really. The principles are equitable use, flexibility in use, simple and intuitive use, perceptible information, tolerance for error, low physical effort, and the final one is size and space for approaching use. So it really is common sense. Other phrases we have are user-centred design. I think Graham mentioned that in his talk this morning. Lifespan design, barrier-free design, design for all is a term that's used in sort of mainland Europe, and inclusive design in the UK, but it's more and more getting used further afield. Surface is our research facility at the University of Salford, and their definition of inclusive design is a way of designing products and environments so they are usable and appealing to everyone, regardless of age, ability or circumstance, by working with users to remove barriers in the social, technical, political and economic processes that underpin design. So that's their definition of inclusive design. The University of Cambridge have a fantastic resource in terms of inclusive design, and their idea of the main phases of inclusive concept design, the diagram on the right hand side of this slide is 4 key elements. It's manage, create, evaluate and explore, and it asks designers simple questions. What should we do next in terms of managing? What are the needs? How can the needs be met? And how well the needs met? So I suppose that's about testing. So that's their philosophy on how you achieve an inclusive concept design. The next slide is a video from the Design Council, and it just sums up what I think succinctly what inclusive design is. Hopefully I can work it. I'll just let Ken do it.
It can be used by 2-year-olds. I know, I have to keep my granddaughters off it. It can be used by someone as old as me without any problem. Truly inclusive and a brilliant piece of design.
The best examples of inclusive design don't shout inclusive, they just happen to embrace a really wide range of users.
Inclusive design is not just old people or elderly people or people with whatever impairment.
It's making stuff that just works better for everyone.
Inclusivity in such a way that you don't have to think, oh, they've done this especially for me in this category, which is an uncomfortable feeling.
Designers really have to empathise with people, understand their needs, their wants, their beliefs.
The most famous example of this for me is the Ford Focus. What they did was dress the young designers up in these third-age suits, gloves that restrict movement, glasses that mimic the yellowing of the cornea. Then the designers had to try and use their own designs, and if it didn't work, they had to improve them.
That car was not sold as an old people car or as an inclusively designed car, but it actually sold very well amongst elderly people.
It's not until you go and really spend time in those places and get to know those people that you're actually able to understand what is meaningful to them.
Whether it's people in wheelchairs, young people, old people, business people, you have to talk to the whole group of people to understand what the product is.
It's about the widest number of consumers, and which business doesn't want that?
If you get it right, it will sell.
Because you actually increase the market, increase the people that you're talking to.
I'd hate to live in a world where there was no consideration for inclusive design.
To me, it's the only way you should design.
If you want to make a difference with design, then you should become an inclusive designer.
So that was a quick video from the Design Council. Thank you. Yeah, which I just think very succinctly sums up what inclusive design is. They spoke about the Ford Focus motor car in that video, and that at the time of production was one of the most accessible vehicles on the market, but it wasn't targeted at people who had a disability. And they recognised that their designers were probably young, fit and healthy, so how can they design for someone or empathise if they can't experience that for themselves? So the third age suit, so for any of you in Kelvin Grove Gallery, there's a copy of the third age suit. Now, it's right next to Sydney Devine's cat suit as well, so I don't know what the connection is there. Yeah, so it just catered for a wide audience. Parents with children who could open the doors really wide, they didn't really need to bother about buggies, car seats, etc. So, inclusive design is about creating products and environments, and for me, policies and strategies as well, that are usable by a wide variety of people. But it's important to realise that it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all, and it's definitely not a bolt on at the end of the process. And it begins at the very start of the process and continues through that journey. And for me, is at the end of the journey as well, something called post-occupancy evaluation, so going back into the design and observing how people are actually using that. And that's an interesting exercise for architects and designers, because they possibly have a vision how they see that space being used, but in actual fact people use it in so many different ways. So that's a learning experience for them. Barriers and challenges. I think we've heard this morning the end user is key. And engaging with the end user, there are barriers for design teams and there are barriers for the end users themselves. Sometimes the way projects are procured, timescale is an issue, and the designers just have to get on and get a design and get the client to approve it, get funding drawn down, etc. If designers are engaging with end users, you and Skyds are here today, accessible venues can be a problem in meeting the requirements of all the needs. If the design team are not disability aware, if someone schedules a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning and they expect disabled people to come along, they're perhaps not fully aware. You know, if people have to rely on transport and they have to rely on taxis, that accessible taxi could be taken up in the school run contract. So for a lot of people, getting to a venue for 9, 9:30, even 10 o'clock can be a big issue. Personal care as well. So if you really, really want to engage, you time your event at a time that's going to suit people to come along. I think knowing who to engage with. But for me, this kind of slide, it's about getting that balance right between the knowledge of the design experts and actually learning from the real experts, because the end users have to probably overcome barriers every single day and they've got lots of experience that they can share. So it's that gel approach, and the diagram shows the dots, the knowledge, and then the experience of the dots being joined up. And it's, for me, that's what it is, it's a joint conversation. We've spoken about education and awareness. I spoke to one of my young planning colleagues the other day, and I was asking him, for his planning degree, what did he learn? How many hours or months or how many modules did he get in terms of accessibility, inclusive design? And he was stumped for a wee while, and he came back and said, not much really. It takes architects 7 years to qualify for a degree in architecture. And again, speaking to some architects that are newly qualified, possibly talking half a day or a day. Say even it's a month, 2 months, or a 7-year programme, that's really not a lot of input into learning about accessibility and inclusive design over a 7-year period. And these are the people that are shaping our built environment. And going back to the building regulations, we're limited in what we can actually enforce. To get an inclusive design brief is really important as well, and I think to state the intent at the beginning that you want this design to be accessible and inclusive. The Queen Elizabeth Park in London, has anybody been down there? No, I would encourage you to. Did you like it, Paul?
Yes.
Yeah, and the intent, every design meeting for that project, the intent was to reinforce this is going to be the most inclusive games ever, this is going to be the most inclusive park ever. And the client set parameters to the design team of the gradients that they wanted, so that as many barriers were removed as possible. Value engineering, it's a horrible term. Was in discussion yesterday via email and phone calls about a scheme, and I think the design team thought they were doing the right thing by providing a meandering path connected to a ramp, and we have value engineered out the associated steps. But what a lot of people don't realise, that not everyone can or would want to use an inclined surface, because it's actually really painful. And some people prefer to use steps where they can hold onto the handrail and actually make their way up the steps. So we've value engineered out that one, unfortunately. And I think the challenge for designers is to get that balance between form and function. Yes, we want our places that we use on a daily basis to be aesthetic, we want them to be, you know, visually nice, but we need to remember that function is an important part of that equation. And I think for me, the lack of access to professionals within design teams is a big barrier, because a lot of decisions are being taken without the right amount of expertise involved in that. And this next slide, I walked past this construction site 3 years ago, and the photograph on the right hand side is the board that describes the professional team. So we obviously have the architect, the interior designer, the landscape architect, engineers, etc. And we have an ecology consultant, and I'm not saying, you know, those guys aren't important, a pool consultant, a water feature consultant, but we had no access consultant. And this was an £83 million project. And it just struck me how the access consultant to me would have been beneficial to that project. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether it's inclusive or not, but the picture on the left is pictograms that have been added onto one of the windows directing people to the main entrance. The wayfinding should be intuitive, you shouldn't have to seek out where the main entrance is. Internally, the right hand photograph, they've thought about seating for people who need a wee rest, but the timber seating, the timber bench, is against a timber wall and it's sat on a timber floor. So for a visually impaired person, there's two issues there. How do they find the bench, and there's a potential for them to actually physically walk into it. Next scheme, left hand, it's the grey colour again. The left hand photograph shows a set of steps, grey, with a grey, only one strip of contrasting nosing at the top, the tactile warning at the top instead of two. Again, it's grey against the grey background. And the right hand photograph is the grey surface with a grey off-white table and a grey off-white chair. Challenging, definitely. The last few slides are just about examples. Cycling is changing. We are encouraged to get out on our bikes to get healthier, but if designers don't think about alternative styles of cycles like accessible bikes, trikes, parents with toddlers getting towed at the back. The top left photograph is a group of youngsters going to school in Holland, where cycling is just massive. So can our infrastructure cope with that if we bring cycling in a big way to this country? Bottom left is a photograph of an older couple on a cycle that's ridden by a younger person at the back, for them to experience what it's like to get out and about on a cycle route. I think that's Falkirk area, and I think more funding's going towards that project. And the bottom right is just different cyclists on a well-structured cycle path. But there's a yellow sign in that photograph that's not legible from here, but what it actually says is for the cyclists to warn them to look out for pedestrians, which I think is quite funny. Funding was just made available, I think, this week or last week for various local authorities in Scotland, and it would be interesting to see how many cyclists are involved in shaping those new cycle paths. Seating, very, very important, because we need to get out and about, but for some people maybe a wee bit older, have a temporary disability, it can stop them going out if they know there's not a seat on an access route. So the top left photograph shows a bench seat, and you can only access it via a chipped path, and there are stones at the edge of that path. But the photograph on the right is a chap who's a wheelchair user with his dog, sat beside a lady on a bench having a nice chat. The top left photograph is an example of seating at the Queen Elizabeth Park, where they seem to have thought, I'd probably say their contrast and colours not great, but in terms of thinking about the end user, there's a gap in the seating, where if you're a wheelchair user or someone with an assistance dog or a child in a pushchair or a buggy, you can still sit in the seating along with it with your family and friends, and you're not having to sit out and be separate. This top left photograph, the chap's obviously had a long cycle and is a wee bit tired, so it'd be interesting if the designer of this bench thought about people actually use it to sunbathe, or just think, well, people just sit on benches. We use benches in different ways. In the right hand structure, they've incorporated 2 sets of armrests for people who need a wee bit of help to get back up. Top left picture is a traditional picnic bench, timber tabletop with the 2 seats either side, the bench seats. It can be quite difficult to manoeuvre into the bench seats, and sometimes doesn't cater very well for people round about it, whereas the photograph on the right is an accessible picnic bench where you can just draw a chair up, if you're a wheelchair user, pram, buggy, pushchair, whatever, and you can all sit round the table together. The carpets on the left is actually a set of stairs, and I think a lot of people would struggle with that carpet design. So where is the end of the step? You just really don't know. Steps on the right hand side, although they're not 100% perfect, excuse me, they have attempted to get a carpet woven with a contrasting nosing included. And okay, the nosing is not round about the actual nosing of the step, excuse me, but they've realised that it can be an issue. Seating again, thinking about the end user, top left photograph, 2 seats together, and there's one at a higher height. Not everyone can sit in a low down seat and then easily get back up again. The bottom right photograph is a train carriage, and quite often you'll see parents or grandparents having to hold the grandchildren up to look out the window of the train. But as this designer has thought about the end user of a child being able to look out the window the same as everybody else. Desk, standard desk, you sit at a desk all day. We've been told that we need to get stand up and walk about more. The picture on the right hand side is again a girl sitting at a desk, but the PC can actually be adapted, so if she wants to stand for a wee while and do her work, then she can, or drop it back down to a comfortable height when she's seated. Lectern comes in different shapes and sizes, as do people. So the lectern can be raised up if you're a particularly tall individual to suit your needs, or if you happen to be shorter or seated, the lectern can drop down to suit your needs as well. Excuse me. Visual acuity is very important when designing. This left-hand photograph is a picture of a ticket machine, and again it's grey. So you really struggle when you look at that to know where do you put your coins, if you have a visual impairment. The middle photograph is another style ticket machine, lots of colours, and it actually has 1, 2 and 3 on it. So you know, you start at process 1, that's your journey you want to take. Number 2 would be the paying the money, and then number 3 where you collect your ticket. And the third photograph is just showing someone with a visual impairment and how they would see that ticket machine. So a very restricted view, so there's less scanning for them to have to do. Surfaces and lighting can be just really quite problematic for a lot of people. The photograph on the left is a highly polished red surface with lighting above and a shop window to the right, throwing out quite a lot of light. So some people would look at that and think, oh, is the floor wet? Is it there for slippy? Am I going to fall over? And if it's that bad, they then probably won't go to that place again if they're independently navigating, because it's just too different. And the photograph on the right is uplighters, And if you're wayfinding and having to look down console, that can actually cause quite a lot of glare. Examination table, standard height. So if you're a doctor, particularly tall, you have to bend over to examine your patients. Or if you're a shorter person, having to get up onto the bed, they have to provide a step for you and have to help to get up and down. Whereas the photograph on the right is a rise and fall examination table, and again it's just offering flexibility in use. Left photograph is a set of lockers for a sports area, and again the designers actually thought about the end user. So if you have a prosthetic limb, some of the standard lockers might not be able to accommodate your limb when you're doing your sports. So this one, if you are a wheelchair user, you can roll under the lockers, open the door. The locker key is the key is quite visible with contrasting colours and braille as well, and very large numbers to remember what your locker number is. The photograph on the right is a raised flower bed. Sometimes raised flower beds don't have the facility for wheelchair users, or somebody maybe who's just got a bad back and wants to sit down while they're potting plants or whatever. But this design allows a wheelchair user to sit on and pot away to their heart's content, the same as everybody else. Just come to the last couple of slides. Anybody know, there's a few words coming up, what the word is? That's Swahili, that's is Russian, Portuguese, Chinese, Polish.
That's an apple.
Oh! Okay,
Sorry.
one person.
Might be the lunch coming or something. See an apple, say something.
Yeah, it's in Portuguese it's maçã, which is apple.
Okay, fantastic. So, but if you were struggling, that language wasn't your first language, symbols are really, really important in signage. So yes, correct, apple. And Apple shops don't even have the words apple above their stores, they just have that symbol because it's an iconic symbol and everybody recognises it. It was back in the 14th century, King Richard decreed that all public houses should have pictures as well as names. So if it was the wheat sheaf, it had to have a photograph of a wheat or sheaf, because a lot of the population was illiterate, but they still need to trade. So if they were meeting somebody in the next village or town, then that's where they met at the wheat sheaf, so they knew where to meet. So just to summarise, inclusive design offers flexibility and choice for everyone, irrespective of ability, age and gender. The end user is definitely key to engage with the end user, and to design inclusively and not exclusively. That's the message. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Is it Susan I'm speaking to?
Yes. Yes.
Susan. Well, it's more of an observation rather than a question, because I'm not sure anyone can really do very much about it. Public buildings, for me, are a nightmare. Any public building. I'm thinking particularly of hospitals. I had reason last year to visit the Royal Infirmary with my husband, who was very unwell. But because of it's a very busy place, the reception desk was way inside the main entrance, and when I was having to help my husband to the hospital in an emergency situation, I was completely at a loss. I was still dependent on him. He can see more than I can. And even though he was very unwell, he still had to try and find a department where to go, for what I was supposed to be helping him to. I find that these buildings often have very high ceilings, so there's a lot of echo. And I'm just wondering if there's any way that not only, obviously, to me, big is not beautiful, because it's vastly too big, and I'm finding that I'm overwhelmed with the size and complex of these buildings, as well as the sound that's coming back to me in the way of echo, and lots of people around, not everybody necessarily aware that I'm requiring assistance. So is there anything you think that maybe architects can do to incorporate my concerns into making it more of a helpful environment to people like me?
I think, no, I think you've highlighted a lot of the issues, and I think it's getting access consultants as part of the design team, but not. What sometimes happens is access consultants form part of the bid process at the very, very beginning, and then they're not always taken in that journey throughout the entire design process. And there's a lot of people would struggle with that type of building that you've spoken about. Some people on the autism spectrum, you know, big space, noisy. There's a lot of people that there are barriers to. One thing that I forgot to mention is there are over 40 access panels in Scotland, and it's Disability Equality Scotland who are the umbrella organisation for them. And they are actually working with the Scottish Government just now to try and get a change in the planning legislation, because currently only community councils are the statutory consultee. So I know they're trying to work really hard to get access panels as a statutory consultee. It's a start, because by that time the design's locked down, the clients agreed the cost, etc. But that would definitely be an improvement. So there's an awareness raising session going on. Yeah, but yeah, sorry, that's all I can say in that one. But I totally appreciate the difficulties.
Just want to respond, it's Paul from York's Guide, to that question. Whilst changing the environment could be difficult, what is interesting is the emergence of the use of technology. Here in Edinburgh there's a new app product being launched by an organisation called Neatbox. The app itself is called Welcome, and it's exploiting the digital technology of mobile phone with beacon technology. And the idea is, where somebody arrives somewhere where they require some assistance, they can actually use the app before they set out and say, I'm coming to visit you such and such a time, my name is, these are the requirements that I have, so I might need a sighted guide, or in my case I might need somebody to help with doors and things like that. And when you arrive, your mobile phone triggers something at the central reception desk, and a person, if that's what is going to be helpful to you, is dispatched to meet you. So it removes that really, really difficult thing of finding the focal point to make yourself known. Your technology does it for you. So that's Welcome, new app.
Sorry, did you have a response?
I can be loud enough. Sorry. I was speaking to Peter before, I think, and I remember that I saw an article about this app that connects visually impaired people with people all over the world, regardless of when they are awake, so that someone can be your eyes if you need to find like a different color blouse or whatever. Does anyone know the name of that?
Yeah, it's called Be My Eyes.
Yeah. Be My Eyes. Sorry. Thank you very much. Because in that case, it would be quite helpful. You know, if you are going out and you need help and you have internet as well, of course. But yeah, Be My Eyes, you said.
Yeah, it's called Be My Eyes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Another question.
Sorry, read what was said about Be My Eyes. What I wanted to say to Susan was, do you think there's kind of an education thing that should be happening with architects prior to even before they become architects? In the sense that, you know, because you say there's not a lot of things to do with access in the whole training process, and should there be some way of getting more disabled people involved with going into universities and doing talks to potential designers before we get to that stage? Because one of the things I used to take part in London, doesn't happen so much for me in Scotland at the minute, is that I used to take part in the access panels when they'd actually go after where they had a contract and they asked us questions, but by then they'd have the money and everything else put in place, and so we would just ask at the end site of how to do certain things, which wasn't absolutely the case. But so I just wondered if you thought there's kind of a way of having a bit of more of a unit about training in that process?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And it's I suppose it's about one of the things that did come out after the London 2012 legacy is the acronym's BEPI, the Built Environment Professional Education Board, and it was to upskill members of organisations like the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors or RIES, architectural organisations, and to actually educate them in accessibility and inclusive design. I know the Design Council and the Centre for Accessible Built Environment, or CAE, Centre for Accessible Environments. There's a few courses going online, but I think actually speaking to the students and engaging with them face to face, I think definitely beneficial to them. Yeah.
And is there any way that we can do that, lobby that, or do anything about it?
Probably contact the individual universities that offer design courses. It's something that I've been thinking about actually.
Oh, maybe we could talk in lunchtime.
Yes,
do some collaborative stuff on that.
Yes.
I really would like to try and get that bedded down somehow, because I think it's still all these years on. I always meet architects, and they always come to think, we did this little bit, and we like to meet and talk to you now, but it's after the event, and I'd like to make it so it becomes a process thinking for them before the event.
Yeah.
One more question.
Well, it's not so much a question, but I'm a member of an Access panel, and we're based in Peebles, and we got asked to consult on a railway station at Stow, for the Borders Railway line. And we got during the planning process, we got looked at it and said, is there anything there that we can help you with? And the length of the ramps, so the journey that a person had to take would have been too long, so you'd have been knackered by the time you got to the train or got to the platform. So all we suggested was putting a couple of seats, or a bit for you to rest if you needed. And it's making both company and planners aware that we are out there, so consult us. We learn, you learn.
Yeah, I would say definitely consult, but involve and engage are the two elements that come before the consultation, so you actually get a chance to inform the design rather than consult on it when it's almost a done deal. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan.